and was covered in CJ stuff is also triplexer, duplexer, quadplexer. Of course, that adds a bunch of money. You know, if you want to get started out, just try those different antennas. If you have some more money, then start going with the filtering, the triplexers, or a lot of the multi-band. You know, CJ showed the high power bandpass filters, but there's also, you know, the low power stuff that he just touched on. You know, the 200 watt version that goes after your radio, just transceiver RF level. There are several different kinds, from Dunestar, DX Engineering, Morgan Systems, who bought out ICE, W3NQN. They all make the transceiver power bandpass filter. So that would be kind of like the next step up. And also inexpensive, CJ also covered, was the coaxial stub filters. That can help a lot. So I guess that's kind of what I wanted to add.
It takes a combination of things, and it really depends on a small lot. If you have one antenna, as I said, the duplexer, triplexer, but you just need to try things, because you know, it just depends on a lot of variables. You know, horizontal versus vertical antennas, that gives you some isolation. Coax stubs are really inexpensive, and it just kind of depends on a lot of variables.
QRPSO2R.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, that's a good point. Starting out at low power is definitely the way to go. You do have to be careful of your receiver overload. One thing that's kind of nice about the L-Craft K3s, you know, a lot of us have, is that if you have too much power on one radio and you have the other radio on, it'll actually say like RF overload or something like that. It measures how much power is coming in the receive port, and it will tell you that, hey, back it off. So, but definitely sticking with low power is an excellent way to start.
Yeah. Any other input on this question? Okay, next question. If I'm only running one radio, how do I know when to stop calling CQ and go S&P? In other words, how long of a dry spell should I tolerate?
Well, one way that you can do that is look at how many stations you've looked at in the last 10 minutes calling CQ, and then S&P, and see how many stations you work. And that'll give you a clue as to whether it'd be better to be S&P or call CQ.
Gary, you have something to add?
Yeah, I don't go very long with without somebody calling me before I start looking on the second VFO or even on the second band. Now, I don't do SO2R like you guys do, but my 7851, you know, I can listen on another band just as well as I can listen, you know, on the band that I'm on. So, you know, I jump around a lot. And if I don't have something, you know, if I don't have a rate going, then I'm looking almost within a couple minutes at the very most. And it depends on the contest too. If it's a slow contest, you know, then you just have to drag it out some more. So there's really no exact, you know, question or answer on how long you wait. But you know, the DX contest, I CQ almost all the time, and just to keep the rate up, I much rather CQ and have the stations come back to me than searching and pouncing. And you know, I also go assisted too a lot, and you know, that's a different ball game too. You know, you can really click off some quick mults and then get back to CQing. So that's about what I got to say about that subject.
So Mike and Jerry both run very large antennas, full legal limit, and they're on the east coast of the black hole. So they have considerably better propagation than those of us a little bit further west. It's amazing.
Hey, I'm almost straight south of you, Chad. So,
but that means you shoot less through the auroral zone than I do.
Yeah, that's
right?
true. That's true.
So I guess the point is the 200 miles or the 150 miles maybe or less that separate Jerry and I, it can be night and day, and it can also be night and day between southern Wisconsin and northern Wisconsin. I mean, W0 AIH I heard a lot of stuff that W0AIH couldn't hear just because he's a little bit further north. I guess my point there is that what Jerry finished with is it really depends. And in Mike's and Jerry's situation with their operating conditions, especially running high power, their limit of rate is considerably different than those running low power in a contest or QRP, right? So that rate is different. But one thing I heard many, many, many years ago, I forgot who said it. I think maybe it was Trey, N5KO, maybe it's not. He said, if you're not CQing, you're losing. And that
makes
really,
a lot of sense.
It's really key. If you want to win, if you want to do really, really well, if you want to up your game, you need to CQ much more than you S&P. And also, when you're CQing, especially when you're not used to it, a slow CQ rate feels really, really slow because your mind isn't engaged in doing stuff. When you're S&Ping, you're turning the dial, you're listening to who it is, you're typing it in, you're kind of mentally engaged. It feels like you're more active. A slow rate, it might be identical rate on CQing, it just feels slow because you're just sitting there waiting and waiting and hitting F1 and waiting, hitting F1 and waiting. But in reality, many times you're going faster. So the other thing I was going to add is, if you feel the rate has dropped, for whatever that long time is in this question, you might consider, maybe something's changed, maybe propagation changed. In this specific question asked about one radio. Yeah. So that might be a good time to switch to another band and see if you can get something going on a different band, maybe.
Or just change frequency and let the RBN respot you.
Very good point. Went on CW, yes. Yeah. And the last thing I kind of wanted to add is, sometimes if you think the rate has slowed down, that might be a really good time, before you go in S&P to go take a needed bathroom break or food or something. Go take that break away from the radio, come right back, and then start your S&P, see how rate is going, but only S&P long enough to find a new CQ frequency, then start CQing again.
Yeah.
One comment I want to add to that. I noticed that W2GD at K9CT in the, was it the work doll? No, it was the
WPX.
Well, yeah, the WPX, right, Craig, thanks. Yeah, he answered CQs because of the point value and the multiplier, and a friend of ours, I worked this friend of ours, and he never worked John because John at K9CT was not calling CQ that much. He ended up doing, and he did really well just by clicking on spots.
Well, in that contest, you S&P for multipliers.
Right.
And you control the point value of your QSOs.
Yeah, the same thing like in the Russian contest, and also maybe the IARU, where you're looking for the headquarters stations that are big multipliers.
Yeah.
But in WPX, if you CQ, the multipliers come to you.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just so many multipliers.
Right.
So,
well, the problem with that is they could be just U.S. stations.
Yeah, just one
but,
pointers.
there's multipliers there too. So.
Yeah, but where he's able to work 6 pointers on the low bands, that makes a big difference.
Yeah.
So that was another point that Mike made, that if you have spots, so if you're assisted or if the contest allows spotting, you can S&P at a blazingly fast speed by, clicking on those spots without tuning and listening. So it does make some sense to take a break and go and, work those spots as quickly as possible.
Anything else, guys?
There was a quick follow-up question during your discussion of, isn't CQ versus S&P dependent on what your QSO goal is?
I'd say your QSO goal is always
maximum.
Make it, and you're going to get there by CQing and.
Yeah.
One thing to remember is when you S&P, you're not controlling the rate. You know, if there's 2 or 3 stations that end up in front of you, you know, you just wasted a lot of time. And
Yeah.
it goes back to what Jerry was saying, just call CQ, even if it's slow. You know, you'd rather have them come back, you're at least controlling the rate. Okay, let's go to the next question. In some CW contests, you hear many, presumably casual, operators sending slowly. How fast should I be sending CQ? Should I worry about losing QSOs because I'm sending at 38 words a minute? These are probably tongue-in-cheek.
I was actually surprised that Mike said he sends at 38 in the sprints, but I guess besides Mike, there's not probably too many SNCers that go that speed. I would say my average amongst all contests is probably right around 30 words per minute. At the start of a contest, maybe 32. At the end of a contest, maybe 28, but usually 30. And whenever someone calls in slow, I'll drop it, you know, down a little bit slower. I won't match their speed word for word. I guess it also, a couple other things, it depends on conditions. If, you know, you're on the low bands and it's staticky, it doesn't make sense to send above 32 words per minute like ever. So there might be like 28 or something like that. And then the exception for me sending faster than 32 would be if there was several people waiting in line. If, you know,
Right.
2, 3, 4 people called at once, I'll kick it up to 36 or something like that. And when the pile shrinks down to 2 or less people, then I'll slow back down again.
Yeah, I mentioned that before, that it seems as though all the times I've slowed down to like, and I say slow down to like 29 or something, it doesn't seem like the QSOs really increase. It doesn't seem like people are waiting for you to call CQ. It seems like if you're calling CQ at 32 or whatever, that eventually they listen to several QSOs and they figure out what the exchange is and they kind of jump in there. And so I don't see that, but sending at 38 and not getting answers, I agree, is not good. And you need to drop down to 35, 32, you know, in the 30s sometimes. And I do that. But yeah, the sprints or something, every second counts in a sprint. So I'm sending as fast as possible, really.
I'm kind of the same as Chad. I hardly ever go above 32 unless it's, you know, you've already worked somebody on another band and they know what your exchange is. Like any of you guys, I'll send 40 words a minute at you because I know you can copy it and you know my report. But there's lots of times I'll, like in a DX contest on 80 and 160, I'll go down to like 28 words a minute, 26 words a minute. So I'm just about like you guys on the speed, but I never go up to 38 unless it's somebody special, like you guys.
Thanks. You're special too, Jerry.
Anything else? Next question. So this is broken up. This has a lot to do with planning. What is your contest planning process? Do you use VOACAP to plan your operation? How do you go about analyzing previous year's logs? What is usually the scope of your plan? Just hourly rates, schedule, band times for difficult zones? This is kind of a wide open, this could be lengthy answers.
Craig, before we move on to that, do we want to do the Q&A that come in?
As there was somebody, Mike, was there a question?
There's a couple, yeah.
Oh, there are some questions. There's been a few comments back, such on that last one. He was speaking in tongue-in-cheek. 32 was the answer he was looking for. Otherwise, there are some questions. I was going to hold them until.
I was wondering if it'd make more sense if it was on the question we were on, just to keep going with that question and answer.
If we can try and work some of those in, I'll try to fit those in at the end before you move on. The only one I can see relating to that is, does the auroral flutter make you slow down? So I guess this is for Chad.
Mike's the speed demon, so well, of course. So you know, as I mentioned, it's all about conditions. If there's noise and whatever, like on 160, you slow down. You know, Jerry, you know, low, potentially even low 20s at times, or if someone's having problems copying you. So yeah, in Aurora, you cannot copy super high speed. So yeah, of course, when the conditions warrant, you slow down appropriately.
Yes, definitely. Now, one about the speed, I noticed that a lot of people, and I used to talk to a friend of mine who was not a CW op. He was not a CW contest operator, but he was a DXer. And he swore that slowing down sometimes did better as far as getting a call across. And I noticed people doing that, but sometimes it seems like if you're dealing with static from lightning, that doesn't help. It seems like, because it seems like the slow, you miss an element of the call by slowing down. Sometimes if you dump your call in faster, it seems to get through better. So, but that's just the opposite of the Aurora question. I definitely agree. Yeah, you've got to slow down with the Aurora because you get so much of an echo, and sometimes it's just a blur.
I see there's another question here about identifying, and of course, if you're running rate, what do each of you do?
Well, first of all, I would disagree that the law states you must identify after every QSO. So I'd lead with that and say, if the rate is high enough, no, I'll on CW, I'll end with a TU and roll in. I typically identify after about every, if there's rate, about every third or fourth QSO, sometimes every second, every other QSO. And in some cases, like when I'm down at Papa 40 Lima, instead of on sideband, instead of thank you, I'll say Papa 40 Lima. It doesn't take that much more, and people don't have to wait in line to hear who you are, et cetera. So it's on CW, it takes a lot longer. So then it's every third.
Yeah, I tend to go max of 3 QSOs, unless I hear a question mark in there, and then I will dump it in, after a QSO, even if I just ID'd the last time. So you do kind of control rate. Some people disagree with that and say, it's in the rules that you have to identify after every QSO, but I don't go along with that. Now, the guys running 2 radio interleaving QSOs, they do ID after every QSO, but again, that's because of their interleaving and their sequencing that they want to do.
The timing. Jerry, an opinion?
On CW, I pretty much identify, all the time after every contact. But if I'm like at PJ2T and I'm running 250 an hour, I'll say thanks PJ2T. I won't say Papa Japan 2 Tango. I'll just kind of speed it up. And then other times I'll go 3 or 4 QSOs, without IDing. But that really picks up if you got, 20 or 30 guys calling you, then you really just gotta move. Forget about, they know who you are.
Yep.
But I do like to say thanks, but I do not say thank you, because it's one extra syllable, and thanks is good enough as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, so we'll go to the next question. So this had to do with planning. I'm not going to repeat all this again. I'm sure each of you, before you sit down and you just don't sit down and start operating, I'm sure you give it thought. So who wants to start this one?
I guess I could. So 2 parts, 2 different questions here. So me personally, I don't use VOACAP. We are talking, this is a Midwest focused organization, and most of us have lived here a long time. So many of us already kind of know what the general propagation is, where bands are open and when. Of course, there are year-to-year and day-to-day variations to that, but VOACAP won't tell you that tomorrow is different than today. So one of the things you can, of course, do is, listen to the bands, in the days prior to the contest to get used to it, know what's going on, situational awareness. But if you're new to the area, if you've recently moved to the Midwest, or you're operating in somewhere that you haven't operated from, you know, a different island or something like that, then of course VOACAP can give you a general idea of what to expect from that location. And for the second question, my analysis really consists of two things. One is printing out last year's rate sheet as kind of a goal for this year and kind of see what I did when I might have taken off times, when I might have changed bands, things like that. And the other thing I do is I review a bunch of my previous year's 3830 postings, because I'll maybe put some lessons learned in my write-ups for myself, and then that's kind of like my diary, if you will, stored for everyone to see, like good or bad. But I'll kind of review that, you know, oh, I should have done this, I should have done that, and I guess that's it for my pre-contest prep.
One thing, I do not use VOACAP at all, but I do have a sheet of long path openings that I review before the DX contest. And it tells me, you know, say at, you know, 0500, listen for ZS on 80. And it has a number of things like that. Generally, I have it there, and sometimes it does pan out, you know, on listen Southwest on 40 early in the morning. Generally, those are tough to do because you're running on 20 at the same time. But I do try and review that and try and keep that in the back of my mind. It hasn't really helped a whole lot. Every once in a while, something like that. I do look at my last year's log just to see what bands, how the bands were, where I started. And like Chad said, looking at the rate sheet, you want to try and improve on the rate sheet from last year.
And I do not use VOACAP either, but I am a serious DXer. And so I'm always keeping an eye on the DX cluster. You know, when I'm in my office in and out, you know, I look at the cluster, even though I got everything that's on. But, you know, I DX on all bands, 160 through 6 meters. So I got a pretty good handle on what propagation is up, you know, before a contest. During a contest, we got the big screen 4K TV here with the Geochron running. I got an old Geochron on the wall, on another wall, you know, so, you know, all I got to do is twist my head a little bit one way or another. And depending on the time of year, I know where to be looking, when to be changing bands to go look for somebody, just because I've been doing this for almost 50 years, you know. I mean, we're talking lots of experience. And then when it comes to, you know, Chad brought up a good point. I do look at 3830. I don't have to go back and find an old log. Just go back and look at 3830 from last year's score, the year before. And, you know, conditions change so much, it really doesn't make a lot of sense to go back more than a year or two. And now that Val and I are contesting together, she does all the analyzing, and she uses QSOs, and she reminds me of, you know, different openings and stuff too, or she'll be there and catch something herself. So that's about how we go about it here. Nothing, you know, nothing really just special, just years and years of experience.
Yeah, just interject, just the last 3 NAQPs, 2 weeks apart, the difference in propagation.
Yeah.
Just amazing.
Thank God for
K9CT
sporadic E.
had what, 300 contacts on 10 meters or something?
Yeah.
The guys in Florida.
Yeah. And then, of course, normally the West Coast guys have 15, and we don't have it.
Mm-hmm.
And they were whining.
I wonder if the power rolling blackouts affect them, because that happened this past weekend in the phone.
Don't you have a button at your station that you hit to get West Coast blackouts?
We should figure out a way of doing that.
That'd be good, wouldn't it?
Yeah, the East Coast.
This was mentioned earlier before. somebody asked about this and wanted to know if anybody did this, and Mike actually talked about this. Anybody want to make a comment about operating like this in the Midwest? It might be something you do in the Caribbean, maybe, but
Well, actually, I've been doing this on RIDI for, I don't know, close to 20 years already,
right.
something like that. And then, oh yeah, speaking of SO2R boxes, I just happen to have, oh, it's hard to see. This is my SO2R box. This is radio A, B, one ear, both ears, etc. And then on the top, you know, for voice, I had a microphone switches from one radio to the other, and then just a bunch of cords. So this, I built this before 1992, and ended up winning sweepstakes QRP, but nonetheless, used it extensively almost 30 years ago. And I think Mike is right, somewhere in the, I forgot what that was, early 2000s, where commercial units were available. I used the right log one, and it's been working flawless for all that time. And yeah, and you know, TR log from way back when had dueling CQs, long time ago.
Yeah, right.
And so just CT1 BOH has just kind of popularized it with a new acronym, but it's been around for a super long time.
Any other comments?
As far as giving up, you know, I know it's humorous, but you know, this is all supposed to be fun, right? Don't feel that you have to do, you know, 170 miles an hour to have fun. You need to do what's fun for you. And maybe that's 30 Qs an hour, maybe that's 60 Qs an hour, maybe it's 300 QSOs an hour. But you have to start somewhere and have your own personal little goals. Don't worry so much about everybody else. You really just need to make it fun for you. And if you think that you have to go all the way to 2-band interleaved QSOs to have fun, I think you're setting your goals too high too soon.
Yeah. Okay.
If you can just improve from year to year, contest to contest, have fun, and don't think that you have to be the top person, because you're not going to be the top person. It's almost impossible.
Difficult from here. So how much do you use a mouse during a contest?
I can say I never use a mouse.
RIDI contests a lot.
All mouse all the time. Yeah.
Outside of a RIDI contest, hardly ever. But it's always there for just in case, you know, I got to do something. But no, I don't use them much just in RIDI contests.
When we went to the Caribbean, and I can't remember, we were using a right log, we had the, what do they call them, roller balls, and they seemed a little bit easier to manipulate than a mouse.
Yep.
Craig loves roller balls.
Yes, I do.
The other time you might use a mouse a lot is if you're operating assisted, and if you don't know the keystroke to grab some of the spots, it might be easier to double click on the spots in the window. So that might be a time where you use a mouse a bit, but for the most part, a lot of operatings done without. Going back to the previous question, tongue in cheek, I use the mouse all the time to surf the internet, to chat with my friends, and blah, 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 while operating the contest, because, you know, the rates in the upper Midwest are slow. So there's lots of time in between CQs, and you might surf the internet.
Yeah. I would recommend that you always use a mouse in a RIDI contest. That's how you win. A rollerball mouse. So here you go. Okay. So this is antenna stuff. You're designing a station for a contest. So when you guys were building your stations, what sort of things did you consider? This could be a 2-day long response. So who wants to go first?
Well, mine will be short. Since I started building my station in 1975, I just did kind of seat of the pants type heights and so on. I didn't really, you know, antenna software wasn't available for amateurs at that time, basically. And So I started analyzing some of my antennas later, but you know, are you going to move a 40-meter beam 10 feet? It's a lot of work. And so I just I didn't really do too much analysis. Some of my later antennas, my OWAs, they were already, you know, designed. And, but as far as changing heights of antennas, I knew that my 80-meter beam, I didn't want to put it at 200 feet. I wanted to put it at 140 feet, and because of the elevation angle. And so that was one thing. That, of course, that's one of my later antennas that's only been up for like 10 years now, I think. So that's my answer.
It's amazing you've kept it up for 10 years.
It is.
Has it been up 10 years? Wow. Mine
It's
didn't
been-
last that long.
I know. Yeah, exactly.
Now I'm building a 4-square for 80, so that should be a lot less maintenance. But I guess I'll go ahead. I really haven't done any computer modeling either. I probably should have, but you know, I started out here at this location. This is my second, you know, location out on a farm. So this was actually started in about 83, and the first towers went up about 83 through 85. And then I put up a 3-element full-size 40 at 140 feet just because that was a good height, and that's where W2PV had his, and a lot of the early 40-meter Yagis for DX contesting were at 140 feet. And I still have not the same Yagi up there. Now there's a 4-element 40 OWA at 140. It would be nice to have another 40-meter Yagi. Craig has 2, and that's a very cool thing. I'm going to be probably adding a second 40-meter directional antenna sometime. I have dipoles on 40 meters. I got a low one, which I consider low, at 65 feet, which is a great, you know, NAQP height. It's at like 65 feet. And then there's one at 90 feet. So the 90-footer works pretty well into the Caribbean and South America when I don't want to rotate the 4-element 40, you know, turn it off of Europe or Asia just to work South America. But it would be nice to have a directional array, another one on 40 meters, either maybe a 4-square or another 2 or 3-element Yagi. And a lot of it has to do with your tower situation too, how your tower is designed. You know, you can't put a lot of antennas in between guy wire levels because you got to be able to turn those antennas most of the time. So you got to have separation according to the height of the tower, how the tower is designed. So lots of times it kind of goes, well, is this array, is this 15-meter system going to work well at like 60 and 120 feet, which I have on 15 meters, and the guy wires just happen to be there, and it works well. It kicks butt on 15 meters. And on 20, I'm using 6/6/6 on 20, and those just happen to fall in above the guy wire levels. So it all worked out. So a lot of it has to do with how your towers are designed. And I'm sure I could go through and do some modeling, and I'd go, oh wow, this could be better. But you know, how much better is it going to be, and how much work is it going to be, and how much money is it going to take to like Mike says, move something 10 feet?
So, well, excluding Craig, but of the 3 of us, my station's the newest. It's still 22 years old since I installed this joint. But at that time, there was modeling software available. I was pretty familiar with it. I did a lot of homebrew antenna design and building for the old KS9K station in Racine, Wisconsin, before Terry and for TZ got his call sign. And then also a lot of the antennas at K4JA, I designed a bunch of those and spacings. And so I was dabbling a lot in antenna modeling since the early 90s, actually. So before I built my station here, I did do a lot of simulation. And if you've all caught my recent emails on the reflector about, antenna choices and stuff like that, I started with what was my goal? What am I trying to do based on where I live, right? So I'm in the Midwest, and a lot of the, I spent a lot of time at some superstations like KS9K, so monoband stacks were kind of normal, but that was way out of my criteria for dollars to be spent. It was hard for me to find a piece of property 22 years ago that fit my pocketbook. It's not a gigantic farm. I'm on about 1 acre. So whatever I needed to do had to be spaced much closer than the other guys here. So that leads into the interaction, kind of like the SO2R stuff before. And I kind of, back then I did both domestic and DX contests. So I try to think, how do I maximize the station for both DX and domestic while minimizing cost and maintenance. I was deathly afraid of heights, so doing my own maintenance was kind of a concern. I do some of it still, but I don't like it. So I did model my entire station, all of the antenna. I had a plan for every antenna that I intended to put up before I started digging the first hole. And I put it all in one gigantic model. So every antenna, every tower, every guy wire, the mast, Yagis, the booms of the Yagis, and of course all the wire antennas. I put all of that into one gigantic model, and then kind of looked at every antenna to see what it looked like all by itself and what it looked like when I put all the antennas near it. And most everything was fine, but I did find my original antenna for 80 meters was, I think it was called like a K9CT, like a lazy dipole. Instead of a dipole with the apex at the top, you put a dipole pulled out from the side of the tower, and it's kind of directional in that direction. And then I had two of them. I could phase them. So it's kind of like a 2-element vertical. And what I found was my second tower, which was about 61 feet tall, had a huge interaction to that antenna. It wrecked the SWR, it wrecked the pattern. And of course, it was only the one that when it was pointed in that direction. If it was pointed the other way, then it was fine. So it turns out that the 60-foot tower plus the guy wires and the ground made a perfect 80-meter delta loop. And so that caused a lot of interaction to the antenna. So what I found out is if I put an egg insulator near the ground, that it turned the tower into a non-resonant thing. If I put the egg insulator up towards the top of the tower, then the 60-ish foot antenna, or excuse me, 60-ish foot tower with a bunch of Yagis on it, made it capacitive loaded. It looked like an 80-meter vertical. So by having the guy wire attached at the top of the tower and insulated at the bottom, it made it non-resonant on 80. So I was able to find that out, which was very helpful. What else did I want to say on this? Back then I used a program called AO. It was called Antenna Optimizer. Nowadays, I don't know if you can find that, but there's a free Windows program called Mana Gal. It's Mike Alpha November Alpha dash Golf Alpha Lima. It's Windows based and it's free. And factors that I considered, again, being in the Midwest, I wanted to do well in DX contests. So I have a a stacked pair of tri-banders. So only 2 antennas for 10, 15, and 20, and I can stack them in one direction towards Europe. Or during stateside contests, I can point one way and one the other way. And then again, I mentioned on the reflector about, you know, different dipoles and stuff like that. Mike brought up, I think it was a interesting thing, was also tower stresses, you know, or maybe it was Jerry. If you start mounting how many Yagis can you handle on your tower, and what happens when you put them, you know, what's the loading? What can that do? So I read a book by W6QHS, Dr. Dave Leeson. He did a book on modeling Yagi antennas. So it was a lot about calculating the wind survivability of Yagis and Yagi elements. But a lot of that knowledge directly transferred to towers. So I made a gigantic spreadsheet, and I was able to put antennas, different wind loading at different heights of the tower, to make sure that my mast wasn't, you know, that my mast would survive 100 miles an hour, tower would survive 100 miles an hour with all of the Yagis side mounted, etc. And one last thing is that was brought up is when you do side mount, you have to worry about your element spacing, where you put that next to the tower. If you are stacking antennas and bolting them to the tower, either in a fixed direction, or if you're doing a rotating tower, that's less critical. But if you want to if you're going to have a fixed tower and then independently rotate those side mount antennas, you have to have a fairly large window between elements to allow the rotation. Less so if you use an expensive tick ring rotor, but you have to have a fairly large window between elements if you want to do like a side mount swinging gate type thing. So that kind of really limited the antenna choices as well. That was a lot to say, but I think I covered it.
That's an excellent point there. And those swing arms take require a lot of room, and monobanders, thank God, monobanders, you can usually get them configured that you got a pretty good opening there. But you take a multi-element tri-bander and then try and jam it in, and then you're going to get all kinds of interaction from the tower, the steel on the tower. So, and then you got to make sure that your guy wires below the Yagi, whatever one you use, is insulated, because those, if they're not insulated, and I mean insulate them right where they connect to the tower. Don't have any short steel, pigtails or anything, and then transition into non-metallic. You want to take that non-metallic right to the tower leg. So, and then you got to be able to buy the best stuff that's out there. Don't go cheap either.
Yeah.
Because the tower can fail.
Yep.
That
Mike?
goes
Yeah, I lucked out. I
along-
was able to get some Philistrand non-conductive for close to free. And Jerry brings up a good point. The multi-element tri-banders, it's right now, Force 12 was the one I believe that started it, but essentially, a bunch of monoband elements on one boom means a lot of elements are really close spaced together. It's almost impossible to find one of those antennas that can have a swinging gate on a tower, because you need about 4 feet between elements to accommodate a swinging gate on a Roan 45, for example.
Yeah.
But when I built 22 years ago, most of those things didn't exist, and I have old KT34XAs, which had a lot of they had tri-band elements and therefore a lot of spacing between them.
Chad, what are you using for tri-banders now, did you say?
Still KT34XA.
Yeah, I had probably 2 of those and 2 of the 34As in years back, and they all got destroyed in ice storms. So so they're long history, but they work pretty good. They were good antennas.
Mike, did you want to add anything?
Your discussion on side mounting and whatnot goes along with one of the questions or comments that popped up as I'm considering installing a 7-element tri-bander at 35 feet fixed on Europe so I can use my main quad bander and optobeam to work other parts of the world. The two antennas would be switched so we could cut down on moving antennas and keep the Q rate going. Is one of the comments that came in just before you guys started talking about, side mounting antennas. And another comment came in about modeling antennas, and they all say we should move to W1.
One
Great
thing I would
idea.
comment, a 7-element tri-bender at 35 feet might be a little low for Europe. I would say that would be a better height for the Caribbean and South America than for Europe, if you have a
Definitely.
choice. I have fixed antennas southeast for every band. For every band except 160. And so I've actually worn out relays switching because I switch so much between Southeast and Europe. I have stack matches inside for 10 through 80. And so a fixed antenna is very good.
I will say we're down to about 10 minutes of our scheduled time. You are the last program of the day, but I think Anthony is probably flexible with closing this out, and then we would just have the prize drawing. So if we need to go a little longer and you guys are open to it, we can probably keep going for probably a short while.
Okay, we have one last question before, if anybody else has got any additional questions. But this is the last question that was sent in by our members. Ergonomically speaking, do you take any particular steps to enable you to keep operating? Do you sit motionless for hours, or do you do something to break that up? Eventually, however, you have to take a break. That's not spelled right. Do you plan your breaks? How long do you typically go between breaks? Anyhow, who wants to go first?
I will. I generally do not take a break, except I do have a standing position, an alternate. I have if my headphones and mic won't reach, I have a pair of wireless headphones that seem to be pretty good. I parallel keyboards, so I have another keyboard so I can stand up. Monitors, I have a monitor switch that I had to hack to work, instead of 1x2, it works 2x1, or just the opposite. And so if you have a good rate going on a run, I can take a standing position. Otherwise, I try not to take a break, but I do try to move. And like the ball players, they do these with your head. I do that a lot. I mean, I don't like to stay motionless. Like many of you know, I do play tennis every day, and I do get 10,000 steps a day. And when I'm operating a contest, I only get 700. I don't feel very good just doing that. So that's my 2 cents. I generally do not take a break unless the contest is really bad. And when I do that, my wife will say, "What are you doing? I thought you were in a contest," because it's so unusual that I do take a 2 or 3 minute break and walk away from the rig.
Okay.
I guess my only real ergonomic step that I take is I move my coffee pot from the kitchen to within an arm's reach of my desk, so I don't have to go to the kitchen to refill my coffee mug, which is right here. But unfortunately, that is a lot of coffee. But I don't use any sort of porta potty device. I have not gone to that length yet. I do have a bathroom, I don't know, about 20 feet away, so I can get up and so that kind of goes into the next question about breaks. Sometimes my breaks are centered around having to use the bathroom, so I'll run up and go to the bathroom, come back, and hope my CQ frequency is open. If not, kind of like that other question that I answered is, if I lost my CQ frequency, maybe that's a good time to S&P a little bit while trying to find a new CQ frequency. When else might I take a break? Sometimes when well, obviously if there are no required breaks, then it would be ideal that you don't take a break. But when there are required breaks, you kind of have to think a little bit strategic about them. like, 3 o'clock in the morning when the rate is super slow, that's probably a good time to take a break. Maybe in between band openings, like European opening shutting down in the morning, and then it's just the slow going South Americans until either Japan opens on the high bands a little bit later, or Europe opens up on 40. That might be a good time to take a short break because there's not a whole lot going on. And then as far as how long going between breaks, well, ideally, whatever is appropriate is as long as possible is ideal, or when the strategy calls for it, I guess would be the other thing.
Yes, I do not plan any of my breaks, and like Mike, I get up a lot, but I'll keep on operating. I'll just kind of move my legs around a little bit, maybe for a minute or so, and I don't plan any of my breaks except during a DX contest. It seems like from about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning for about 2 hours till about 5 or 6, depending on the time of year, is a good time to take a break if I'm single op, for a couple hours. I at least try in a DX contest, and I know Mike can do 40, 48 or so, 47. I believe my record was 47 out of 48 at PJ2T. I was single op. I did about 7,000 QSOs that weekend. Chad, do you remember that? You were in 6Y and you beat me.
And I think I slept a lot more.
Yeah, and I was fighting power line noise from there. The 80 and 160 was just horrible, but that's another story. But that's my longest I've ever done a contest, 47 out of 48. I like to try and get 42 to 44. And I think the longest I've gone without a bathroom break was back in 2011. I was asking Val because she kind of remembered that year, and that was when 10 meters was open. It was open really good before the downfall of 10 meters, and Europe was just in for hours. And I had a great CQ run frequency, and I was just running for hours. And I got to a point where I was actually hurting and in pain. My side was hurting. I mean, I was ready to bust, but I was not going to lose my run frequency. And I made it for like 6 hours. 6 hours on one frequency. So that's my best, I think, without getting up. But I like to go outside when I get up, especially when it's cold. Boom, that's a like instant wake up. So I get out of the shack. I just go out, walk around for a couple minutes, take a break outside. Boom, that wakes me up again for a couple hours. So that's about it for me.
Any follow-up by any of you to this question?
One other thing, and maybe everybody does this, in addition to the wireless headphones, I have a wireless keyboard. So I wish I could have a wireless screen, but I can go and actually go to the bathroom and still call CQ and listen. It's a little tough without a screen. My bathroom is only like, the next room is only like 10 feet away. So occasionally I've done that, not too often.
Anyone else? Okay. What's your favorite contest? What's your favorite thing to do? If you could pick a contest, what's your favorite one?
Oh, mine is CQ Worldwide. And maybe WPX sideband because you can work everybody. It's a toss-up. WPX sideband probably for me, and worldwide phone.
I go with worldwide phone and worldwide CW are my favorite ones. That's when most you know, the biggest number of people are on, the largest amount of people, and the most rare DX is on.
Yeah.
Yeah, Chad?
From home, I'd kind of agree with that. I do like the NAQPs. It's hard to pick a favorite because each have their own unique appeal. But
Yeah.
if I had to pick a favorite, it would buck the trend here, and I would say ARRL DX phone from the Caribbean Island, because I love rate.
Yes.
I don't care if I'm working 400 an hour and they're all W9s.
Yep.
I would rather
was
work
gonna add that too.
400 an hour of W whatevers than work you know, JT1CO on 160 and nothing else for the next 6 hours or whatever. I like the higher rate, so yeah,
Same
that's why I like to go to the Caribbean, and unfortunately it's good and bad. It requires less strategy. You just point all your antennas to the US and go. It's fun though. I love the rate.
Thank you. We've consumed our time, and I really appreciate everybody's responses. You all answered, I thought, very well to all of the questions, and you probably got a lot of people thinking about what they could be doing with their own stations, which is what this is all about. So we'll say, yes, Jerry, you were going to say something?
Hey, can I add one more thing? I just
Sure.
want to say what great presentations today. Congratulations to all the presenters and the moderators too. You know, everybody. This was super.
Yeah, it's
If
fantastic.
you guys don't mind, there's a question in here that came in that I would like to ask you guys, if you guys don't mind sticking around for just a couple more minutes.
Yeah, go ahead.
There is also one comment for W9RE that there is software to mirror your PC screen onto your smartphone. So when you run off to the bathroom, you can keep watching. The question is, I personally don't mind them and often use them. Europeans use them a lot. What are your thoughts on the use of or non-usage of cut numbers? Some CW contests may or may not be advisable to use. Opinions and or thoughts, please. Is there too much tendency to enter N instead of a 9 or E for 5, etc.?
Personally, I don't mind cut numbers at all. I know there's been some discussions on the reflector that people do not like them. I like them just because sometimes they seem to get through better than the longer, you know, characters in a number. So I just don't mind them at all. Now, I don't know, E for 5 in a cut number is a little bit tough, but E in 599 is okay. I you know.
They're okay.
For sending, I will only send 5NN, but a serial number, I personally don't use cut numbers other than the 5NN. I won't complain too much about others using them. I just copy what I hear.
Ready to switch chairs?
To each their own.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't.
Craig, what do you say?
Well, I tell you, with WPX and the serial number, you better be paying attention.
Yeah.
Because they come, you know, especially if they're going 35 to 40 words a minute. And sometimes you wonder, what are they thinking when they do that? But if you're S&Ping, you already know the number before anyhow. But if you're running, they'll come at you pretty quick. You better be ready. So, and Europeans love them. I guess practice. Anyhow, Mike, anything else?
No, just some comments. Thank you for all. We'll go ahead and end this. And I would recommend to everybody watching that the SMC reflector, and there's information on the W9SMC.com website about joining the reflector. It is open to all members. And in addition to all of the presenters here today and panelists, there are many, many other very knowledgeable members that are more than willing to share their knowledge and expertise with all of the other members. So I encourage you to take advantage of that. Post to the reflector, join the discussion. With that, I am going to bring Anthony back to wrap up do our closing comments for our first ever virtual SMC Fest, and then Val will get the rest of what you've been waiting for and hand out some prizes. Anthony?
Okay, Mike, thank you. Thank you. You set up a lot of what I was going to summarize, but yeah, that's basically it. I'm glad you all could make it here today. This was our first ever virtual SMC Fest. I think it went very well. I hope you all learned a lot. And for all the guests that we had out there, I hope you learned enough to be excited about perhaps joining SMC. As you can see, we have a great depth of knowledge. And as Mike mentioned, the reflector is such a repository of information. I mean, even mid-contest, if you drop a note out there that I'm having trouble with this, or I can't do this, or what just happened, somebody will answer you, and you'll get an answer fairly quickly and be able to solve your issues and move on. I would like to thank all the presenters today. Great job, wonderful job. I also want to thank the moderators, Tim, CJ, and Mike. That was spectacular. It all went very well. I would also like to throw out that we don't know what the future is going to hold. And right now, we've already in the latter stages of securing a place in Naperville for SMC Fest 2021, but that might be highly contingent on whether or not coronavirus forces us to do another virtual SMC Fest. If that's the case, we'll be here same time. We'll be better at what we're doing, and we'll try to find more stuff. So make your plans for about this time next year to be in Naperville. Otherwise, we'll be on Zoom. And with that, I think we're up to the prize drawings. I just want to say thank you for joining us today, and congratulations to everyone who made it here today and spent their day with us. Val?
Hey guys, all right, thank you. So here's what I did. Just so you know, if you registered for SMC,